Hello, we're going to look at a process flow diagram for SAP Sample Management. This diagram has several steps. I'm going to enlarge this diagram so we can walk through the steps. Going up to the top, again we're covering sample management, and this diagram starts out with showing that we need to generate some sort of transaction that will trigger our inspection lot. A scenario for an inspection lot here, we have a purchase order, production order, and a stock transfer. So the idea here is saying we need to generate a movement of some sort to generate our inspection lot. So in this case we had inspection for purchase order receipt. In this case we have inspection for production receipt or in process inspection, and then stock transfer inspection. So what happens is once one of these movements happen, here we would have had a purchase order being created, a production order being received, or a stock transfer happen. It then checks the material master to see if it had an inspection trigger on for that movement. Then the next step is it says, okay, it does. It now goes and finds a matching inspection plan for that type of trigger, that type of inspection type. But this time now it's going to check and see, are there sample drawing procedures, which is the master data that is turned on that activates sample management to generate individual samples. But once versus just getting the sample size, which is a sample procedure does, the sample drawing procedure determines how many samples we need to pull and actually generates a separate number for each sample. So because we now have that, we can get very specific in our sample drawing procedure, how we need to handle each sample, if we need any sample labels. And this is where we use a lot when we're doing sample management. You're generating labels for the initial samples, or generate the labels in the lab, and sometimes they'll write on the bags or write on the items and then take them to the lab. Then they'll affix the labels there, or the labels will be out in production and affix them there and bring them to the lab. In either case, ultimately we want a nice label on the samples. And then we can get very specific in the inspection report what needs to be done for each sample. So we have the inspection lot created because it now sees their sample drawing procedures here linked to the inspection plan. It then will generate separate records for sample management for the samples. So if there's 8, it says it needs to generate 8 samples, it will generate those 8 sample numbers. If it needs to be 8 samples and 2 composite samples, it'll generate 2 more samples for composite samples. And then if it needs to generate 8 samples, 2 composite samples, and 3 retained samples, I'll generate 3 more records for the retained samples. And then the question is, when it comes to the lab, and now because we have separate samples, we now have the power to bring in the lab, check in the lab, saying we received them, and be able to track each one separately. So now we can check that it is sent to the lab for immediate inspection processing. So now we have nice labels sitting on the samples being sent to the lab. Somebody in the lab receives them in, can officially say they received them in. And we also can send to the retained lab any of the retained. So if we need to keep samples for 2 years or 3 years or however long, we can keep track of those because they have a special number. We can assign those to a storage location and say when they're going to need to be destroyed, when they're no longer needed, and stored. And then we can monitor and then destroy or pull when no longer needed. This is very powerful, this retain. If you picture your retain labs and how you have them located and in the sample stored in there now. We can assign storage locations for each of the bins or however it's set up, and then assign or issue these retains to those locations so you know exactly where they're at if you need to pull them. That is a quick look at the steps in the sample management. Thank you.